that it was their job, that it was their war. And I know Willie brought this up too during the run-up to the election. People saying, what are we going to tell our grandchildren in the run-up to the Trump election? And I know, Willie, you were saying, well, what you tell your grandchildren is you're a journalist and you did your job. Your job's not to beat a candidate. Your job's to report the news. And we're going to show some polls in a second that suggest that a lot of Americans may believe that there's a bit of an overreach by a lot of us in the media and also by a lot of the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, there are a lot of Americans who are clearly concerned about what Judge Kavanaugh may have done to Dr. Ford. And we're listening to Dr. Ford's testimony a week ago. And in the interim, since then, what we've gotten is stories about Judge Kavanaugh maybe throwing ice cubes in 1985. And other stories like this that look to a lot of Americans, particularly Republicans, but I think even Democrats, like piling on and trying to take the man down. So here's what we have now. According to a new NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll, the large advantage Democrats held in enthusiasm has all but evaporated. 80% of Republicans now say the elections in November are very important. That's a jump of more than 10 points just since July. The Republican figure is just 2 points shy of the Democrats now, who saw their enthusiasm tick up only slightly from the prior poll, Joe. So there you have it. I mean, that's just over the last month or so.
Well, and Willie, we've said it time and time again on this show when people do the generic ballot tests. It's not the generic ballot tests that I look at, that a lot of other people look at going into midterms. It's voter intensity. And the Democrats have had a massive advantage in voter intensity over the past 18 months. And it has evaporated in the course of a couple of weeks. Again, Mike, this is just one poll, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist or you don't have to have a PhD in politics to understand what the last couple of weeks have done to energize the Republican base and the conservative base to say, hey, I hate Trump, but I'm not a big fan of what the Democrats and the media are doing right now, too.
Oh, for sure, Joe, yeah. For sure. And look, at the one thing we can document, and you can document it any number of ways, is the president's constant assault on the media, fake news, has really, really worked. It has sunk in all across the country. And there's been a series of stories about the Supreme Court appointment that have appeared on television and in newspapers that have caused, I think, a lot of Americans in this polarized political atmosphere of ours to stop, pause, and say, hey, this is just a bit too much, especially one of the later stories earlier this week about a note that Judge Kavanaugh, when he was 17 or 18 years of age, wrote to his friends about a rental, a beach rental for a weekend. And at the end of that note, it said, you know, we'd best warn the neighbors, I'm paraphrasing here, we'd best warn the neighbors and tell them that a bunch of drunks are going to be renting this condo for 2 days. And I think a lot of people looked at that and said, you know, well, he was 17 when he wrote that. Come on. So things like that have added to this enthusiasm on the Republican side.
Well, you have that, and Mika, like Willie said, breathless stories about Kavanaugh throwing ice cubes when he was 17 or 18 years old. Anonymous stories coming out with absolutely no sourcing. Stories about gang rape factories coming out, absolutely no sourcing. You know, I wish everybody would remember what Marty Baron tells his people at the Washington Post. We are not going to war.
Right.
We are going to work. And this is just a reminder. And again, who knows? Maybe Kavanaugh goes down. Maybe Democrats have a massive landslide. Look, I can tell you right now, these are just snapshots of how Americans feel today.
Yeah, but it's not supposed to be how reporters feel and how media analysts feel at this point in a case like this. And it's not even a case yet, although the FBI is looking into it. It's a hearing. It's a job interview. And what we saw, and I think what is playing into this blowback you're talking about, is a lot of members of the media reacting emotionally. Like, for example, did Brett Kavanaugh feel like maybe he was lying? Did it feel like maybe he was lying about drinking? Did it seem like maybe he was lying about blacking out? Did he seem like he was kind of a jerk? Did it seem like he was overly aggressive? Yes, sure. But that does not mean he did it. And we just need, I mean, these are emotional reactions that lead to things that are said on Twitter, which lead to reaction to that, which, by the way, leads to exactly what Donald Trump wants.
Exactly what he wants. Report the facts. And it would probably be better if everybody in the mainstream media
just report the facts.
Reports the facts and not take every little note that he wrote on the calendar 20 or 30 years ago and suggest that it proves that he goes to gang rapes.
Yeah.
That he's a serial rapist or some of the other preposterous things that have been saying. But anyway, we're talking about this for a reason.
All could be true.
We're talking about this for a reason. It's because right now, what has happened over the past couple weeks has energized a depressed Republican and conservative base and now actually put a lot of Democratic Senate seats in danger.
New Fox News polling shows Republicans making gains in a number of battleground Senate races heading into November. In North Dakota, Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who is one of the most vulnerable Democrats this year, is trailing her Republican challenger, Kevin Cramer, by 12 points.
Let's stop right there. Jonathan Lemire, of all the races right now, Heidi Heitkamp seems to be the Democrat who, boy, she just seems like very endangered right now. And unlike every other Democrat in these tight races, it's hard to imagine how she fights her way back, especially with the Kavanaugh vote still in front of her.
That's right. Strategists that I've talked to on both sides of the party put her as the most endangered Democrat by far. That poll that you just showed right there really underscores that. There are other seats, Missouri and so on, where Republicans might have a slight edge, and I'm sure we'll get to some of those in a minute. But this one in particular, Heitkamp, they feel is in real trouble. And they think that this Kavanaugh moment here has energized Republicans who, as you've been saying, have really desponded, really down about how the spring and summer have gone, and now feel like they have something to fight for. Now, it will be interesting to see, does that enthusiasm persist if Kavanaugh were to be seated on the bench? Like if he comes through this and he gets on the bench, is this some of this enthusiasm almost anger, like a justified, like, how they're treating our guy like this, how could they deny him? And certainly if he doesn't make it, then yes, you'd think that would continue. If he does get on, does some of that dissipate? I mean, that's what we'll see in the weeks ahead.
Well, and that's a couple weeks ago, I was talking about how actually, ironically, the person who wins this fight may lose some voters in the fall because that anger will dissipate. They win. They don't feel as motivated to go out. But there's no doubt that Heidi Heitkamp has a lot of reason to worry this morning, just like Mika, Red Sox fans.
Okay. In Tennessee, where President Trump rallied on Monday, Republican Marsha Blackburn is leading Democrat Phil Bredesen by 5 points.
That's a real switch. Betsy Woodruff, that's going to be a tough battle, which I would guess is probably going to go down to the very end because, wow, Bredesen's favorable ratings in the state of Tennessee are numbers that any politician would dream for.
That's right. And Bredesen is the kind of candidate who needs to win if Democrats are going to pull off a surprising flip of the Senate. If the Phil Bredesens of the world aren't able to nab these kind of seats, it's extremely unlikely that Democrats will be able to have sort of a sea change in the control of the Senate as we go into next year. So this poll is really important. And what it indicates, of course, is that the conventional wisdom when it comes to how Tennessee votes, that Tennessee is a super duper red state, may still bear out as we move forward. Another Senate race where there's some polling that looks like it's potentially less favorable to Democrats is Texas. We've seen some numbers in the last 24 hours or so indicating that the surge in support that Beto O'Rourke had potentially may not bear out. And this is what's so important when you talk about polling, is that we get polling data for months and months and months leading up to these election days. And it's always interesting, and we always pore over it and try to read the tea leaves and try to make sense of what it all means. But ultimately, polls are largely useless until October. They just don't capture the way voters are going to think on Election Day. And that's why these numbers coming out are so important and are just going to dispel a lot of the conventional wisdom that's sort of calcified over the last 6 months.
And what you want to look at always, Mika, trend lines.
Yep.
That's all that matters over the next 4 weeks. And again, these trend lines could dramatically change in a week. depending on which way the Kavanaugh hearings go.
The Fox News polling shows a tie in Missouri's Senate race between Democrat Claire McCaskill and Republican Josh Hawley. While in Arizona, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema tops Republican Martha McSally by 2 points. And in Indiana, Democrat Joe Donnelly also leads his Republican challenger Mike Braun by 2 points.
Willie, Indiana, Missouri, they're just complete toss-ups right now. Could go either way.
Yeah, and I think if you look at Claire McCaskill, the way she's going to have to vote and the way she will vote on Judge Kavanaugh being a no vote for him, it'll be interesting to see which way that cuts. I mean, that's a tough vote for her now. If you look at this race, it's a genuine toss-up, and by the way, has been within the margin of error for some time now. This was always going to be something of a toss-up, but she. She seems to find a way over the years. We'll see if this year is different. And John Podhoretz, our friend, the editor of Commentary Magazine, tweeted yesterday, so basically we could be seeing a nearly unprecedented political event in November, with House waving toward Dems and Senate getting more Republican at the same time. Never happened before that I know of. So, Joe, that would be a very interesting dynamic here.
It would be interesting. I don't know that that's going to happen. We have a set of Democratic polls. What I've always found is if you have a wave breaking for Senate candidates, you usually have that same wave breaking for Republican candidates. And, when voters go to the voting booth, if you have somebody that is angered by what they're seeing on TV, whether they're a Democrat or whether they're a Republican, it drives them out to vote. If they're so motivated, they're going to vote for Republicans straight down the line or Democrats straight down the line. But Willie, who knows how October is going to end. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.